When you heard that title, I'm not sure what images came to your mind, but I did a little search looking for images, and you'd be surprised of the interesting comical things that I found. But I really wanted to just think about, gosh, we are all trying to do the best we can all the time. And sometimes, depending on your role and what you have going on from day to day, you may feel like you're missing the mark. You may feel like I am trying and I'm trying and I'm trying and it's just not working out. And so you may be a little hard on yourself. So I wanted to offer a session that says, you know what? You may be trying to be perfect, but we're not perfect all the time. And that's okay. It really is okay to just do the best you can at that given moment. So in our session today, we're going to talk about perfectionism. We're going to talk about good is your goal. We're going to talk about mistakes happen. Now what? Gratitude and self-compassion. And then I found this little image here on the screen of this little perfect windowsill seat with these perfect pillows in perfect places. And it made me think and chuckle a little bit, honestly, about how we ourselves oftentimes try to portray our lives and our situations as perfect. And we tend to dress up really well and we tend to put on a really good front for people and just trying really to get through. But this windowsill looks so perfect and it looks like everything is all together. And then I thought about, I love the drawers at the bottom. And I thought, you know what? I bet there's stuff stuffed in those drawers. And it makes me think about our lives, how oftentimes we are just trying to keep it together and move through life and do the best we can. And oftentimes because of that, we dress up and we try to act a part. But if you were to open the drawers, stuff would fall out. And that's okay. It really is. So I want to start with these three quotes. And as I read through these quotes, I invite you to participate by adding which one of the three speaks to you the most. And all you're doing with this is putting a number in the chat. And so I'm going to read them through. So number one, I'm going to read all three of them, and then I'm going to ask you to vote. And you may find that you like all three. You may like two, but just try to narrow in on your top quote that maybe speaks to you the most when you think about yourself. The first one, I may be perfect. I may not be perfect. Sorry, I may not be perfect, but I am perfect enough to be a very good rendition of me. So that's one. Number two, I am not perfect, nor will I ever be. I am a work in progress, and that is definitely good enough. So that's two. Number three, I'm not perfect, but I'll always be real. I'm not perfect, but I'll always be real. So those are the three. So which one speaks to you the most? Just put a number in the chat. All right. So here's what I'm not saying when I talk about throw perfect out the window. I am not saying by any means that we should not do our best. I'm not saying we shouldn't try as best we can when we're doing anything. I'm not saying that effort does not count. I'm not saying that productivity hacks aren't helpful, because we all know that they are. There's a lot that you may find that work for you, and then there's some that may not work, but they can be helpful. I'm not saying that we should not work on ourselves. We shouldn't work to improve ourselves. We shouldn't work to improve our skills. Not saying that. I am not saying weaknesses don't matter. I'm not saying procrastination isn't real. And I'm also not saying that you should ignore or dismiss your mistakes. That is not what I'm saying. Here's what I'm saying. I'm saying don't let perfect be the enemy of good. You've probably heard this before. This is a very common statement. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. But here's the thing. We can hear a lot of quotes, but how often do you really live by it? So how often do you find yourself trying to be perfect when you have something good already working for you? Not saying again that you shouldn't improve yourself, but sometimes when we focus so much on perfection, we leave no room for error. And sometimes because you leave no room for error, you get stuck in processes, you get stuck in spaces because you're so afraid to make a mistake. You're so afraid that if I don't get this perfect, oh, okay, I can't try. I shouldn't try. I have to keep working on it before I have to keep working on being perfect. So it just reminds us that Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Also, perfectionism can come from the fact that we really care about getting things right. So you may be like, well, what's wrong with trying to get things right? There's nothing wrong with it. We should try to get things right, but just think that thin line of perfection versus doing good or doing great. Here's something to think about also. When we talk about perfectionism, I want you to pause and think for a second, internally or externally, where do you target this? When you're trying to be perfect, are you targeting it to yourself? Are you criticizing yourself? Are you thinking nothing is ever good enough? Are you just hard on yourself? Or is your perfectionism targeted to others outside of you, society, organizations, and so forth? So that's just something to think. When I'm thinking about perfect, trying to get things right, trying to, is it me that I'm really judging a lot, or am I judging the world? Or is it both? So play along with me for a moment here. I'm saying you might be a perfectionist if. Now, of course, this is a short list. We can all make a list that runs pages and pages, but this is just a few things to think about. You might be a perfectionist if you clean your workspace and put everything away at the end of the workday. Or that's just clean, right? You take 30 minutes rewriting a simple response to an email. You may say, that's just accurate. You rewrite your social media post over and over before submitting it. That's just careful, you may think, right? You will never share an okay picture with a friend. You may say, that's just smart. Every piece of your wardrobe matches. You may say, hey, that's just style. You ponder a project for weeks before starting because you are so afraid of making a mistake. You may say, that's just details. You change your outfit several times when preparing for a presentation. You may say, that's just me trying to make a good impression. You tweak your presentation right up to the last minute. Somebody might say that's a procrastinator. You judge others for not appearing to care or put in more effort on a project. You might say, that's just me being a hard worker. You judge others when they make mistakes. You may say, that's just me being observant. When you make a mistake, it ruins your day. You might say, that's just me being honest. You rehearse your mistakes over and over again. You might say, that's just regret. You wish you'd done something different. So I just wanted to give you a little glimpse into, you might be a perfectionist if. And then the caveats attached to it was kind of how we tend to justify things sometimes. So why? This is like the perfectionism 101. How did this even come to be? That's one way to think about this. How did this come to be? How did you become this perfectionist person? One, it could be personality. And I'm not necessarily saying being a perfectionist person is not a good thing or is a worse, a terrible thing. I'm just saying pause and think about it. Maybe it's personality. Maybe you're the person that really tries really hard to do everything right on time. You're organized, you're a planner. Maybe it's personality. Maybe it's upbringing. Maybe you were raised in a family or a home where you had to do everything a certain way. If it wasn't a certain way, it wasn't correct. So maybe that's it. Maybe it's culture, society. Maybe it's your experiences. Maybe you were in situations where certain things were expected. Maybe it's unrealistic expectations of yourself and others. Maybe it's perspective. Maybe it's social anxiety. Maybe you have some anxiety around not doing things right or being perceived as not doing things right, being perceived as being irresponsible or not being a professional or something like that. So there's a variety of things that can be attached to the social anxiety piece. Maybe it's self-criticism or doubt. Maybe you're just really critical of yourself. Or maybe you have really high standards of yourself and of others. Also, you may just simply have a fear of making mistakes. Just that simple. You just don't want to make a mistake. You don't want to do the wrong thing. Maybe you want to make a good impression. Maybe you don't want to appear inexperienced, ignorant, or naive. And it may just be personal pressure, right? Or even external pressure. So let's think about this perfection or authenticity. Perfection or authenticity. I want you to answer to yourself these next three questions, either yes or no. The first one, is your whole self perfect? Yes or no? Where did this idea that you need to be perfect start? Is it family, friends? Does it make you feel uncomfortable to think that you are not perfect? Yes, no, sometimes. So what and who really matters? One of the things I want you to really think about when we talk about throwing perfect out the window is, are you, in your effort to be perfect, not showing authentic you to people that you care about, to the people that matter to you? Are they able to get to know who you really are because you are showing them? So sometimes in your effort to just look perfect and do everything right, people don't know when you have a challenge. People don't know how to support you. People don't know when you're going through. And so sometimes by just throwing that perfection out the window, it gives you space to be authentic. It gives you space to be transparent with people, and it gives them an opportunity to support you. So I want to pause here for just a second before we move forward. And I want to remind you that you are enough. You are enough. So I want you to say this to yourself. Just take a deep breath. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. And just say to yourself, I am enough. I am enough. Say it at least 3 times. I am enough. And if you're in a space where maybe you can't speak out loud, just think it. I am enough. I just want to remind you, as you're throwing perfect out the window, remind yourself that you, as you are enough. So let's talk strategies. So we're going to just go through a few strategies to help you as you are trying to figure out, how do I throw this perfection out the window? And what do I pull into the window? Like, what do I need for myself? Strategy 1, make good enough your goal. Make good enough your goal. So what does this mean? We tend to we can extend ourselves grace by aiming for good enough instead of perfection. Aiming for good enough instead of perfection allows us to give ourselves some grace. It also releases the pressure of perfection. And also, when you think about this, there may be many, many opportunities where you've done something and it was great, but in your mind, you were saying it's not perfect. For example, if you're a baker, maybe you baked a cake and the cake tasted good, but the last time you baked it, it tasted better. And so you're like, oh, it's not perfect. I'm a baker, and sometimes I bake things, and I'm like, last time I liked it better, or I need a little bit more butter, I need a little more of this, or what have you. So oftentimes, if we just pause for a moment and reflect and think, you know what, it's not perfect, but it's good enough. It's good enough. Let me also give you guys an example. Earlier this week, I actually I come to work I'm on site 3 days a week. And I was on site and I looked in the mirror and I noticed my clothes look wrinkled. My sweater looked a little wrinkled, my pants looked a little wrinkled. And I had to pause and be like, wait a minute. And I had to decide right then and there, is it really that big of a deal? I could have really beat myself up, but I said, you know what, whatever. It's not, it's not as straight as I would like it to be, but it's okay. It's going to be okay. So sometimes we have to decide that something is good enough. If you're working on a presentation, you may have a good presentation, but you keep tweaking and tweaking and tweaking and tweaking. At some point, you have to say, this is good enough, right? So what does good enough look like for you? What are some small steps that you can take to help you as you are working towards good enough? what are some things that you can do over the next few days, where you can simply relinquish some things and say, you know what, this is good enough. So also, it is possible to get so focused on the end result that we get stuck in the present moment. So that's why sometimes just saying, you know what, this is good enough. But whether it's a work project or a relationship, every excellent thing has a place to start. And if we get so focused on perfection that we stop moving forward, we will never get to the finish line. So keep in mind, there's so much joy to be found in just doing something without the pressure of perfection. Just keep that in mind. That's strategy 1. Make good enough your goal. Strategy 2, stop obsessing over mistakes. This might be a little bit of a tough one to think about. Stop obsessing over mistakes. For one, slow down, label it. If you catch yourself obsessing, just pause and think, what is happening? Why am I doing this? Label it. Take a deep breath. Calm yourself down. Ask yourself, what am I afraid of? Like, what's happening? Why am I doing this to myself? And there's probably some fear behind that mistake and why you're really obsessing over it. But just pausing and thinking about it sometimes can help you to release it. Also, let the fear or anxiety burn away. That's basically saying, you know what, realign with reality. Don't get so caught up in thinking about this mistake that you lose sight of, you know what, is this really that big a deal? Because sometimes it may not be. And sometimes by doing that, you can surrender it and say, it's okay. It's going to be okay. Also, don't overanalyze the mistakes or shortcomings, because when you do that, it definitely can rob you of your peace and your joy. It adds stress and anxiety. So don't overanalyze it. And then get out of your head. Get it out of your head. If you are a journaler, or if you like to talk to a friend, somehow kind of release it by maybe journaling is a good way, or talking to a friend is a good way to kind of let it go. Helps you to stop obsessing over it. And then switch gears, basically switching what you're focusing on. Another thing I want you to think about when you're obsessing over your mistakes is, are you trying to perfect something that is not a strength for you? That is really something to think about. Are you making mistakes or feeling like you're not doing well at something because you're really working so hard at something that really isn't a strength, or maybe is not a passion for you? Just something to think about. So mistakes happen, now what? Quick reminder that your mistakes don't have to define you. You have to think, what do I need to do to get past this? You made a mistake, own up to it, forgive yourself, admit the mistake, make amends, and always be in a teachable mode. When you make a mistake, kind of remind yourself, well, what am I going to learn from this? Or what did I learn from this? What's my takeaway? And I found this little quote that I really appreciated that says, never regret your mistakes. Admire the courage it took to attempt the unknown. And of course, our keynote speaker just talked a lot about courage. Admire the courage it took to attempt the unknown. So basically, don't beat yourself up so much. Don't dwell on it so long that you don't learn whatever you need to learn from it. Take it away and move on. Strategy 3. Embrace gratitude. I love gratitude. I think, sometimes you can do gratitude journaling. You can talk to a friend. You can just pause and think, let me think of 5 things I'm grateful for today, 5 people I'm grateful for. Sometimes that helps you switch gears, like we just talked about. It helps you to switch gears a little bit. And it does take practice. It takes practice. It is a very intentional thing. You have to pause and you have to say, okay, whew, this just happened, or this is not going the way I want it to go. You know what? Let me pause and think. I need to kind of pull myself out of that mode of focusing on that thing that's not working or the thing that I'm struggling with, and think, what am I grateful for? Actively look for things you're grateful for every day. It can be something as simple as finding a good parking spot. It could be something as simple as, it started raining after you got in the building. It could be something as simple as it started raining after you got home from doing your shopping or something. So sometimes it's not necessarily these humongous things. It could be really everyday small things. And by keeping that attitude of gratitude, it helps kind of reset us a little bit. Fourth strategy, honor self-compassion. Honor self-compassion. So self-compassion is extending compassion to oneself in instances of perceived inadequacies, failures, or general suffering. So what you want to do is show patience to yourself. Show yourself some patience for your shortcomings or your mistakes. Or, and also keep in mind our good enough or how we feel. Our best varies from day to day. So when you show yourself some compassion, you are acknowledging that, you know what, I am probably at 70% today, and that's okay. I'm going to do the best I can at 70%. Another day, you may be at 95%. You're like, I'm at 95 today. I'm cranking along. I'm getting all these things done. I'm making a difference. I'm doing whatever. But just keeping in mind that our best varies from day to day. And so showing yourself some compassion helps you to acknowledge that and just do the best you can at the moment. So people who have self-compassion are happier, more optimistic, and less likely to be depressed or anxious. That's one way to think about it. And then there's the piece of resilience. Some compassionate people bounce back more easily from setbacks and are more likely to learn from their mistakes. We've been talking about that a little bit. So these little phrases kind of jump out to me and make me think about, what does it mean to honor your self-compassion? For one, when you act with compassion, you will never go wrong. When you can be kind to others, but always be compassionate to yourself. Relate to your greatness and not your weakness. Oftentimes we spend a lot of time relating to our weakness, but we all have greatness inside of us. We all matter. We all are enough. We have strengths. So sometimes just shifting and focusing on those things. The purpose of life is to know yourself, love yourself, trust yourself, and be yourself.